people of the internet, this here's the 14-inch MacBook Pro with a 10-core CPU and 16-core GPU, as well as a total of 32GB of unified memory, all within the M1 Pro. But with such specs, how does it compare to an actual gaming laptop, and what features, if any, does it actually need to keep up? Can it run games on Parallels? How well do Fortnite and Steam games run on macOS? Let me show you exactly what this $2,499 laptop can do. So the very first thing needed to make this happen is to install Parallels, and I'd recommend creating a VM with 6 cores, 8GB of RAM, and 512GB of storage if you want to install a lot of games. With this, I downloaded Geekbench on Windows 11 and benchmarked it with 6 cores, which surprisingly it is as powerful as the 2019 i9 MacBook Pro 16-inch my partner has, while running on macOS of course. So today, we're not only going to test games that run on Windows, but also games that have been running perfectly fine on macOS. Plus, I decided to make this whole thing a little battle station. Just know a dongle might be required to connect all of your USB 8 gaming peripherals. For starters, Fortnite has been a favorite for me. It is a game that I've been able to max out within the settings in windowed full screen mode and shows great performance at an average of 70 frames per second, providing you are gaming at a 2560 by 1600 resolution. As you guys know, whether you are playing on console, your custom PC, or even previous gen MacBooks, you might encounter some lag when dropping out of the bus. But the MacBook barely showed any signs of that after multiple drop attempts. Cruising around and engaging in crazy battles always performed well. Although if you are in a vehicle, you might get some dropped frames here and there. Plus, after gaming for a while, the game did crash on me multiple times and loading times into the map can take a while. Regardless, for the time I played, it can deliver a very enjoyable gaming experience, and I never lost a gunfight because of frames dropping. Plus, to be honest, I enjoyed playing without headphones because these speakers sound so good. Also, I did try to connect my Xbox One controller via Bluetooth, and sadly things got super funky. The mapping on the game is completely wrong, and even using the cursor while the controller is connected is chaotic, which is why every time I had to remove the batteries to completely shut it off. I think Apple needs to update the drivers on this one. I maxed out the graphics on a 3024 by 1964 resolution where I saw FPSs of 25. The laptop never made it past 45 degrees, and the fan noise, well, they eventually kicked in. But honestly, if you want to experience above 100 frames per second while keeping decent graphics, you need to play the game at medium settings with a 1920 by 1200 resolution. Alright, so one last thing I wanted to point out is the fact that on windowed mode, the resolution keeps changing, which is really weird. Let me show you guys. So as you guys can see, I no longer have the 19 by 20 resolution available in windowed mode. Instead, it's right here, which is really odd. It keeps changing back and forth. Another game that did very well on the Mac is CSGO. Although my only complaint is that I needed to add these arguments to resize the game window at first, since on a fresh start, it wouldn't let me properly skip the intro of the game. But if I was running a native resolution with maxed out graphics, we saw average frames per second of 80 depending on where we were on the map. Just note that the game doesn't take into account the notch and the curvature of the display, so it's best you run it at a resolution of 3024 by 1890. At this point, the laptop never made it past 46 degrees in the most demanding settings, and surprisingly, the fans did kick in, yielding decibels of 38. Honestly though, if you really want to achieve as close to 120 frames per second, I suggest you crank down your video settings and rock a 1080p resolution. Look, regardless of that, gunfights were super enjoyable, I never suffered from frames dropping, and I couldn't blame my deaths on the fact that I was gaming on a Mac. This is definitely a game the Mac takes care of without any hiccups. By the way, if you ever want to toggle your frames per second, all you need is to enable the developer console, use the tilde, and type CL show FPS 1. But this isn't the only game that does decently well, since Minecraft can deliver a good gaming performance at the right settings. For those who have been following the channel, you know Minecraft is my go-to, and I am happy that if I was ever to switch my complete workflow to a MacBook again, I would be able to play Minecraft with the boys. MC runs natively, but it has issues handling maxed out graphics on this machine. My current settings are 32 chunks in terms of render distance, 120 FPS max frame rate with fancy graphics since there is no fabulous support, and of course full screen gaming with a 1920 by 1200p resolution. The game for the most part yield frame rates of around 20 in these settings, but I do have to admit you're better off casually playing the game in much lower settings. With this, I see less of a drastic frame drop and it allows my gaming experience to be smoother. To be honest, it's not something that bothers me too much because Minecraft graphics are, well, giant pixels. The only thing that bothers me, I would say, is the fact that there's no easy way to access Discord from the game. And so I decided to connect a 4K display and use it as my gaming monitor to test it all out. Going back to Fortnite, I just wanted to show you what this laptop was capable of when connected to a 4K display. Provided we were on medium settings and a 4K resolution, we did get frames per second of about 70. The laptop surprisingly doesn't get that hot, yielding temperatures of 41 degrees, but it's probably because the fans did need to kick in. As for CSGO, because this monitor only caps at 60Hz, I did not care whether or not we reach 120 frames per second, so I maxed everything out and we got average frame rates of 45, with high temperatures as well as loud fans. But for Minecraft, I mean, things can get quite laggy, although it doesn't happen super often and it seems to stabilize within the 40 to 50 frames per second range. Just keep in mind, I left the same low settings to be able to get decent FPS. Regardless, the results while playing on an external 4K monitor were really impressive. But look, all of these games running natively are nice and all, but this GPU can truly show its potential when playing PC-based games. On top of that, the controller within Windows works out of the box, and while gaming on Skyrim, it showed no issues. Skyrim at high settings with a resolution of 1900 by 1280 generates frames per second within the 30 to 50 range. Although in buildings, I often got around 30 frames, but when things were rendered, it tended to drop a bit. My main issue with this VM is that we are running a total of 8GB, so when I started running this game at native resolution and low settings, the RAM usage did start to increase. However, with these settings, frames dropping were quite rare and the CPU tried to deliver steady frames of 50 as much as it could. But when I changed the settings to ultra at a native resolution, the frames per second drastically dropped and didn't deliver a good gaming experience. On top of that, the RAM really tops out at almost 8GB. This is the setting where the fans kicked in the most and the computer got really hot at 46 degrees. Oh, and if you really want to, you can always connect it to the monitor provided that you are playing at a low resolution in 4K. I just couldn't figure out how to make Windows take advantage of the full screen. Now, as for GTA, well, it's not as great as I thought it would be. Playing Grand Theft Auto in full screen with a 1080p resolution and max graphics yields frames per second of about 18, and it's important to know that at such settings, we are pushing the RAM quite a lot. It makes the full game just unplayable whether you are in story mode or online. I just kept wondering if it was due to the RAM since the GPU memory seemed to be fine. Regardless, I did go ahead and try the game at 1080p with the lowest graphics possible and things still were laggy to the point that the game was still hovering at around 20 frames per second, where we even reached a total of 8GB of RAM in terms of consumption. I personally wouldn't say GTA 5 is playable regardless of the fact that temperatures were quite stable and the fans were quiet. I wouldn't use the MacBook to game on such AAA games because it clearly can't keep up with it. Look, I wouldn't buy this laptop for gaming, but I would game on my MacBook Pro. I tried playing games such as Valorant, Rainbow Six Siege, and heck, even Apex Legends, but I always seem to run into some issues. Anyhow, I hope this gives you guys an insight of what it's like to game on a MacBook Pro, and if you ever want to play Rocket League with me, let me know with a #football. Just remember that if you want your controller to work on Windows, it needs to be plugged in prior starting the games. Windows was surprisingly very responsive, and I still don't get why I can't get it to work properly on my 16-inch as we speak. I've been spending quite a lot of time with the new laptops and I've been loving them. I will see you all in our 16-inch review. Take care.